Hello, my name is William Engman, and this is my 2022 National History Day project, William Wilberforce and the Debate to Abolish the Slave Trade. My documentary will highlight slavery and the issues surrounding it, the massive debate to abolish it in England, and William Wilberforce's life and the legacy he left. Now that the intro is done, enjoy the show. Imagine, it's 1772, and you've just woken up in your 10-inch high box a few weeks after you were shipped from Africa. The putrid stench of human urine and feces surround you as you struggle to breathe in the musty air. You haven't been able to move your aching legs and arms in days, and sunlight just seems like a faraway fantasy, something that used to exist in another world. If the screams and crying of children aren't enough, the motionless bodies of your fellow Africans next to you have you wondering when this terrible nightmare will ever end. It seems ridiculous, even impossible, to suggest that another human would implement this upon someone else, but this was the reality of the transatlantic slave trade. From 1526 to 1867, over 12.5 million slave ships were shipped from Africa, and only 12% of them actually completed the voyage. The first slave voyage directly from Africa to the Americas sailed in 1526, but the slave trade was shipping out 30,000 people per year by the 1690s. Finally, in 1787, over 250 years after the slave trade started, someone realized just how inhumane and corrupted this was, and decided to take a stand against it. This man, William Wilberforce, was one of the biggest contributors to the abolition of the slave trade. Born in 1759 at Kingston upon Hull, he was the son of a wealthy merchant named Robert Wilberforce. He was first educated at Hull Grammar School under Joseph Milner, an evangelical minister. Once his father died, he was sent to London, where he came to faith at the age of 12. Here he met George Whitefield, the great evangelist, and John Newton, who wrote the hymn Amazing Grace. These two people were very influential in his life now, and John Newton also helped him much later. Sadly, his parents and friends were against his religious beliefs, and they convicted him to turn back to his worldly ways. By the time he was at St. John's College at Cambridge in 1776, his faith was gone. Though he abandoned God, God never abandoned him, blessing William with wit, charm, eloquence, and wealth at college. His popularity and hospitality made him a born leader, and he drew many friends and followers. After moving back to London in 1779, Wilberforce met and started building a lifelong friendship with William Pitt, the future Prime Minister of England. Both were very motivated to enter politics, and Wilberforce was elected to Parliament in 1780 when he was 21, the youngest age at which someone could be elected. His friend, however, became Britain's Prime Minister at the age of 24. Having friendship with the youngest Prime Minister in history has its benefits, though, and William's political career advanced fast. Once he found faith in 1784 while on a trip with Isaac Milner, a strong evangelical, he felt very convicted about his sinful habits. Isaac was very knowledgeable, and his teachings ignited William's faith. The politician was then led to seek counsel from John Newton, who at that time was an Anglican evangelical in London. Wilberforce was so convicted and led by the Spirit that he questioned whether he should resign from politics and everything he had worked so hard to achieve. After a long period of prayer and thought, he made the famous conclusion that God had set before him two things: faith and the suppression of the slave trade. Wilberforce's embracing of the anti-slavery cause was from the direct effect of embracing the Christian worldview. Even though he despised the slave trade, many did not agree. Wilberforce fought off raids and assassination attempts, once more proving his dedication to the controversial cause. Despite the extreme opposition he faced, he put forward a bill in the House of Commons in 1793 advocating for the gradual abolition of the slave trade. Though it failed by 8 votes, he never gave up. He reintroduced the bill every single year of the 1790s, but little progress was made to abolish it. After many years of fighting on his own, he was joined in his efforts by some like-minded Christians known as the Clapham sect. For 20 years, they labored to turn public opinion and political leaders against the evils of the slave trade. But this was a controversial topic. Many had investments in the slave trade, and it was generating a whole bunch of money for the rich and wealthy. In an attempt to sway those rich and wealthy into voting, William introduced many tactics. These included taking the political leaders to see the slave ships, building the boxes that the slaves were kept in and carrying the chains that people were enslaved in. After people realized and started seeing firsthand the brutality of the slave trade, things started to change. On the night of February 23rd, 1807, excitement grew in the House of Commons. Wilberforce's speeches had many people agreeing with his cause, and many were in favor of the abolition. This was one of the biggest and most dividing issues at that time, and the fate of thousands of lives rested on what went down that night. As the final words of his speech were spoken, the House of Commons erupted in cheering and celebration. Wilberforce couldn't even contain himself, and he sat with his head down and wept. People were amazed at this endearing and passionate individual who had sacrificed so much to achieve freedom for the slaves. Then, after many tears, the House of Commons finally voted to abolish the slave trade by a vote of 283 to 16, finishing Wilberforce's work. But he didn't stop there. William went on to pass the expectations of any man by ending the institution of slavery itself. Just 3 days before his death in 1833, he heard the wonderful news that the House of Commons had passed a law emancipating all slaves in the British Empire. But what can we learn from this? Wilberforce left a legacy of humbleness, passion, and compassion. His example is one that every man should strive to follow, and following our passion, just as he did, is key to making change in a hurting world. Change isn't something that comes easy, but William made that clear to us. The slave trade was a huge debate in the early 1800s, mainly because many had invested heavily into the very profitable industry. Wilberforce was special because he saw the brokenness in it and realized he could make a change. God led him to live a life fighting for the cause, and he always strived to do the right thing. The fact that we can make a change to the many issues we face today is something that many people just don't realize. Fighting and debating for a just cause is something we should all be led to, and you're going to face a lot of opposition along the way. But as William Wilberforce showed us, it's always worth it.